Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. The secret behind invisible power. Most people believe that power is built through raw effort, late nights, and personal mastery. But what if the individuals who reach the absolute summit of society are running a completely different playbook? One where doing the actual work is considered a fatal mistake? Because by the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden system that allows one person to turn other people's labor, knowledge, and experience into enormous power. The vulture mechanism. Now here's the darker part. The original passage uses the image of vultures. Why? Because the jungle doesn't reward only the strongest hunter. There are creatures that watch. They wait. They observe where the opportunity appears. They don't necessarily create the opportunity. They position themselves around it. And when the moment comes, they benefit. That same pattern can appear among humans. Someone spends months developing an idea. Someone else notices. Someone builds something valuable. Another person sees how it can be used. Someone gathers information. Another person positions themselves around the information. Someone creates. Someone else recognizes the opportunity. Do this. Watch who creates the value, who controls the value, and who becomes associated with the value. Those three people aren't always the same person. That's one of the most important details hidden inside this entire passage. Creation, control, recognition. They can belong to different people. Don't confuse doing everything with controlling everything. Here's where people misunderstand the mechanism. The person at the center doesn't necessarily do every task. They don't need to. Their role can become something different. They decide. They select. They coordinate. They combine. They give direction. They decide what survives and what gets removed. They stand at the point where many different efforts become one final product. Don't do this. Don't assume the person at the center must personally perform every task happening inside the system. Instead, watch what happens when separate skills are brought together. A researcher may know information. A designer may know visuals. A writer may know language. An editor may know timing. A strategist may know positioning. Individually, they possess different pieces. The central figure can combine those pieces. And suddenly, the final result looks like the ability of one person. That's the illusion. The power of specialization. Imagine one person trying to master 10 different jobs. They keep switching. Research, writing, painting, editing, planning, technical work. Then back again. Every switch costs attention, but divide the work. One person repeats one task, another repeats another. Each person becomes faster in their area. The entire system accelerates, so the formula begins to appear. Specialization gives speed, gives more output, gives more visibility. And then visibility creates something even more powerful. Reputation. People begin associating the entire output with the central name. That's how a system can create the appearance of extraordinary individual ability. Let me tell you something most people don't notice. Sometimes, the person who looks the busiest isn't the person doing the most work. Sometimes, the person receiving the most praise isn't the person who created everything you see. And sometimes, the person who appears to be a genius has simply learned how to stand at the center of a system. That's the secret. Not necessarily working harder, not necessarily knowing more, but knowing how to multiply your own effort through other people and through knowledge. That already exists. And once you start seeing this mechanism, you'll notice it everywhere. The secret of the name. Think about movies. Hundreds of people can work on one film. Camera operators, editors, writers, designers, sound engineers, costume designers, visual effects artists, researchers, production assistants. Yet most viewers remember a few names. The director, the actors, the studio, the title. The public compresses hundreds of contributors into a few recognizable symbols. Why? Because attention has limits. People cannot remember every person involved. So the brain simplifies. It creates a central figure, and that figure becomes attached to the result. Do this. Notice the difference between the people who create the pieces and the person whose name represents the whole. That difference is everywhere. The speechwriter effect. Now picture a politician standing before thousands of people. The crowd hears a powerful speech. Perfect rhythm, strong phrases, carefully constructed arguments. The politician sounds brilliant, but somewhere behind the curtain may be another person. A speechwriter. Someone researched the subject. Someone organized the ideas. Someone polished the language. Someone created the structure. Then the politician steps forward. One person speaks. Thousands listen. The invisible writer disappears. The speaker receives the attention. Again. Invisible labor. Visible reputation. That's the mechanism. The person you see is not the whole machine. Imagine you're watching someone produce something incredible. A business. A painting. A speech. A film. A scientific discovery. A successful project. You see one name, one face, one person receiving the attention. But behind that person, there may be researchers, assistants, editors, designers, writers, technicians, advisors, people gathering information, people doing repetitive tasks, people solving problems, people spending hours on details nobody will ever see. And then the final result appears. One person stands in front of it. The audience says, "Look what he did. Look what she created." That's where the illusion begins. Do this. Whenever you see extraordinary output, look for the invisible machinery behind it. Because visible success is often the final layer of a much larger structure. Your time has a limit. You only have so many hours in a day. That sounds obvious, but this is where the game becomes interesting. Imagine you decide to do everything yourself. You research. You write. You design. You edit. You organize. You answer messages. You solve every technical problem. You handle every small detail. Now imagine another person. They divide the work. One person researches. Another handles the technical side. Another designs. Another organizes. Another completes repetitive tasks. The second person isn't necessarily more talented, comma. They simply have something the first person doesn't. More hands connected to their objective. One person has 24 hours. A coordinated system can contain hundreds or thousands of hours. That's leverage. And leverage changes the meaning of effort. Balboa, the man who found the opportunity. Now let me take you back several centuries. There was an explorer named Vasco de Balboa. He was obsessed with discovery. He wanted wealth. He wanted glory. He wanted to become a legendary conqueror. After enormous hardship, he found evidence of a wealthy empire to the south, the Incan Empire. Imagine that moment. Years of danger, years of struggle. Then suddenly, information, a massive opportunity. But here's where the story changes. Other people learned about it, and once they knew, the opportunity was no longer controlled by Balboa alone. One of the people around him was Francisco Pizarro, and eventually Pizarro would become associated with conquering the Incan Empire. Think about the psychological mechanism here. Balboa had spent years pursuing the discovery, but discovering something doesn't automatically mean you control what happens next. Don't do this. Don't confuse discovering an opportunity with owning the outcome of that opportunity. Information can move. People can move. Power can move. And once knowledge leaves your control, other people can build around it. That is the Balboa lesson. Now watch how different the next example is. Peter Paul Rubens was an artist, and late in his career, demand for his paintings became enormous. More clients, more requests, more paintings. But there was an obvious problem. Rubens had one body, two hands, a limited number of hours. So he created something much larger than himself. A studio. Other painters worked within it. One could specialize in certain elements. Another could handle backgrounds. Another could work on clothing. Another could handle other details. Multiple canvases could move through the studio at the same time. Suddenly, Rubens wasn't just one painter. He was standing at the center of a painting machine. And then something fascinating happened. When an important client arrived, the other painters could be sent away. Rubens would work in front of the client. The client saw Rubens. The client saw speed. The client saw extraordinary productivity. And the client left thinking, how can one man produce so much? But the client didn't see the entire machine. They saw the center. Do this. When studying impressive output, look beyond the performance and search for the system producing the performance. Because the final performance can be completely real. While still being only a small part of the process, Now the secret gets deeper, because this doesn't only apply to other people's labor. It applies to something even more powerful: knowledge. Think about how much information already exists. Ancient philosophers, military strategists, historians, scientists, writers, kings, queens, inventors, people who spent entire lifetimes studying human behavior. They made mistakes. They recorded them. They discovered patterns. They documented what happened. And centuries later, that information is still sitting there, waiting. Do this when facing a problem. Look for the people who already experienced something similar before you. Because there is something strange about human beings. We often want to learn everything through personal experience. We want to make our own mistakes. We want to discover everything ourselves. But imagine having access to thousands of previous attempts. You don't need to repeat every failure. You can study the evidence. And suddenly, the past becomes an army. Newton's giants. Isaac Newton used a powerful image. Standing on the shoulders of giants. Imagine you're standing on the ground. Your view is limited. Now imagine climbing onto a giant structure built by people before you. Suddenly, you see farther. Not because your eyes changed. Your position changed. That's what accumulated knowledge does. Someone else climbs the mountain. You inherit the height. Someone else discovers a principle. You build on it. Someone else documents a mistake. You study it. Someone else solves a problem. You start from their solution instead of zero. Don't do this. Don't mistake starting from existing knowledge for starting from nothing. Almost every major achievement sits on top of something that existed before. Shakespeare's borrowed world. Now think about Shakespeare. People often imagine a great writer as someone who creates everything from nothing. But stories have histories. Characters have ancestors. Plots have predecessors. Ideas travel from one writer to another. Shakespeare drew from earlier sources, including Plutarch, and later writers borrowed from Shakespeare. This creates a strange chain. One generation borrows, transforms, expands. Another generation borrows again, transforms it, expands it. Human creativity becomes a giant conversation across centuries. Do this. When you encounter a powerful idea, trace where it came from. Follow the trail backward. You may discover that the idea you thought was new has been evolving for hundreds or thousands of years. The most interesting form of borrowing. And here's where it becomes subtle. Borrowing doesn't always look like copying. Sometimes you absorb a structure, a pattern, a way of thinking, a historical example, a psychological principle, a story structure. Then you combine it with something else. The final result feels new. This is how accumulated knowledge becomes creative power. The past supplies the raw material. Your mind becomes the processing system. The final result carries your identity. That's why knowledge can become leverage. The human library. Imagine every great thinker you've ever studied as a silent consultant. One understands strategy. Another understands human nature. Another understands economics. Another understands storytelling. Another understands leadership. Another understands failure. Another understands history. You ask them questions through their books and recorded ideas. They can't speak directly to you, but their experiences remain. Their mistakes remain. Their discoveries remain. Their thinking remains. In that sense, the dead can still influence the living. Do this. Treat accumulated human knowledge as a library of second-hand experience. Because life is short, you cannot personally experience everything. So knowledge allows one human life to connect with thousands of other lives. The credit mechanism. Now we return to the most provocative part. Credit. Why does credit matter? Because people remember outcomes through names. The team disappears. The system disappears. The process disappears. The final name remains. That's why reputation can become disproportionately powerful. One person becomes associated with an entire body of work. The public doesn't necessarily ask, who performed every individual task? They ask, who made this? And they want one answer. One name. One face. One story. That creates symbolic ownership. The danger of being invisible. But now imagine you're the person doing the work. You spend months creating something. Another person presents it. They explain it better. They have the audience. They have the position. People associate the result with them. And suddenly, the person who did the work becomes invisible. This is the other side of the mechanism. The same system that can amplify one person can hide another. Don't do this. Don't assume contribution automatically creates recognition. Contribution and recognition are separate processes. A person can contribute enormously and still remain unknown. Another person can coordinate, present, or control access and become the remembered figure. That distinction runs through the entire passage. The real power is combination. Now put everything together. Other people's labor, other people's knowledge, specialization, historical experience, information, time, coordination, presentation, reputation. These things interact. One person contributes an idea, another contributes skill, another contributes information, another contributes execution, another contributes access. The central figure combines everything. The final product becomes larger than any single contribution, and the public sees the final product, not the entire machinery. That's why the appearance of effortless power can be so convincing. You see the result? You don't see the infrastructure. Now here's the part I really want you to remember. The passage sounds like it is simply saying, get other people to work for you. But that's only the surface. The deeper mechanism is leverage. One person's effort can be multiplied through another person's skill. One person's knowledge can be multiplied through another person's experience. One generation's discoveries can become the foundation of another generation's achievements. One person's idea can become powerful when connected to many other people's abilities, and eventually, the final result may appear to belong to one person. But underneath it, there is an invisible network. People, ideas, history, labor, specialization, information, time, experience, all moving toward one visible outcome. So the next time you see someone who appears unbelievably powerful, don't just look at the person, look behind them. Who is helping? What knowledge are they using? Whose experience are they standing on? Who is doing the invisible work? Who controls the information? Who controls the presentation? Who receives the recognition? Because once you learn to see that structure, you stop seeing success as a single person's performance. You start seeing it as a machine. And perhaps that's the biggest secret hidden inside this entire law. The most powerful person in the room may not be the person doing the most work. It may be the person standing at the center of the most valuable network of work, knowledge, and experience. And when you finally see the machinery behind the performance, the person on the stage never looks quite the same again.